What is going on, ladies and gents? Welcome to VeVe Investments. On today's episode, we're going to be recapping more information from David Yu. He's on a roll right now. He hopped on Randy's podcast, so for those who missed it, or for those who want a little recap, make sure to stay tuned. We break it down into 12 points in this episode. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about several things. We're going to talk about a new whale in the community, company closures. We're going to talk about VeVe strategy, QR codes, and then a few other things. So with that being said, I don't want to waste any time. Let's hop right into the first point. So they start the conversation off talking about the new whale in the community. So up until this point, Dr. Profit's been known for taking the top spot. He is now in second place. There is a new top account on the platform. So the identity of this individual is unknown. David actually said that he reached out to Dr. Profit to see if this was like a second burner account for him. It's been confirmed that it's not, so David doesn't know who it is. But he does make the comment that if we have 20 more of these users, it'd be amazing. And I think we can probably all agree there. So next they go on to talk about company closures. And before we get into the specific question asked, I want to talk about some stuff that's been happening in the space lately for those who are unaware. So in terms of Recur, they are unfortunately shutting down. This is going to be effective as of November 16th of this year. And this was the platform that was promoted and backed by Gary Vaynerchuk. He didn't create it. It was two guys in their mid to late 20s, but he was an investor. Nifty is also going to be another company shutting down. That was effective immediately. McFarlane is investigating possible insider trading, and OpenSea loses their largest partner, Yuga Labs. So Yuga Labs owns the Bored Ape Yacht Club. They've contributed $52.8 million of the $66.7 million in the last 30 days on OpenSea, or in other words, roughly 80% of the platform's revenue. So that is a major loss for the platform. And this was in light of some changes that OpenSea made to the platform that Yuga Labs didn't like. So taking into consideration things like this happening in the space, Randy then asked, based on these downfalls, what is the strategy for getting licensors who may now be frustrated with the space onto VeVe? So David makes a good point. He says that Recur spent a lot of money trying to advertise to the mainstream markets too soon. Another example that wasn't mentioned on this podcast is Crypto.com. That company spent an arm and a leg on advertising. I mean, they own a stadium, for crying out loud. But on top of that, also just a ton of celebrity endorsements. So what David was pretty much getting at here is that this isn't really needed for VeVe right now. He says that if everybody is talking about digital collectibles, you're just going to get more traction in general. And David uses the example that all the traction around NFTs pretty much started when CNN was talking about Beeple. So it's not that people aren't going to talk about digital collectibles again. It's just we're in that kind of slur. And we're kind of starting to get out of that now. Back in 2020 and 2021, you had a bunch of scams and rug pulls and things like that. People lost trust. And it takes time to build that trust back. David did also mention, and I liked hearing this because Recur did have some good IP. VeVe already has partnerships with some IP that was on Recur that they have yet to announce. So I'd be quite interested to find out what these licensors think about how, VeVe's handled their company versus how Recur handled theirs. So we know that up until this point, VeVe has done multiple fundraising events in the past. Randy brings up the fact that there's always going to be crises around the world. So would VeVe consider venture philanthropy or have some sort of venture on the side that's consistently earning revenue? David's exact response to this was, we do. He says that on the Ecomi side of things, we always wanted to get it off the ground. He brings up the fact that there's multiple teams working on different things that no one has seen before, including himself. And then this is when he makes reference to that secret project again and how he doesn't actually even get to see it. I don't know how much I believe that part. I mean, we're talking about the flippin' CEO here, so he obviously knows what the secret project is. But he then says that all of these things are going to slowly come out and the community will start to understand why we've been so busy. For anyone that's been with the channel since day one, I bring up this point in our first episode. So I use Disney as an example because of how long it took VeVe to sign the partnership, which was 3 years. Behind closed doors, it's very likely that they are talking about iterations of the VeVeverse and projects that the community don't even know about. I've said it before, I truly believe that these brands are signing on for a reason that we don't know about yet. The value is in the long-term business model. It's not what, brands have seen up until this point. Yes, what we've seen up until this point is valuable. And there's obviously a reason why people are involved with the project. But there's no way a company like Disney signs on with a startup business like VeVe based off the current iteration of the platform. David says that there's a lot that the team is not sharing, and I'd argue that companies like Disney signing on with a startup like VeVe have signed on because of these things, not because of what we already know. So they move on to talk about QR codes. Randy says that Marvel Unlimited shows have QR codes that pop up that allow viewers to scan the code to redeem a comic. So he asked if this would ever be a feature on VeVe. David's exact response, and I quote, "I'll pretend you didn't say that." So Randy kind of moved on quick here, kind of like, oops, maybe I'm not supposed to be talking about it, but I think that might have been David's way of kind of, just joking around and hinting at the fact that they've already kind of considered this. So what's the most important value proposition when describing VeVe? David's asked, and David starts to go on about how he collects whiskey. This man collects everything. Now you can get your real expensive whiskey, but David says that some of the best whiskey he's had was not too expensive. It was the best for him because of who he was actually drinking it with, or in other words, the community and the experience. So he uses that as an example to pretty much make the point that value depends on culture, customs, and upbringing. And he also uses an example with The Little Prince, mentioning how the French are going to value IP like that more than Eastern IP like Ultraman. So David is then asked what goes into following a company, and he says that he follows companies that VeVe is interested in or currently working with. So that's interesting. But he also says that there's lots of companies he doesn't follow, as he says he needs to be careful, which I thought was kind of funny. And in this case, he's referring to the community. So he says that some brands have actually suggested that he follows them, but he's had to recommend that he shouldn't to avoid speculation from the community. And I think that this is funny because, David only has 30 some odd thousand followers. That's not a small amount, but it's not an absurdly large amount either. So it's just funny how passionate the community is because, you'd expect that to happen to somebody who has millions of followers, not, less than half of six figures. So they then go on to talk about the job of every CEO. David says that generally speaking, the CEO's job is making sure that the company has plenty of money and is able to drive forward in development. However, that isn't always the case in a startup business. In his exact words, he says it doesn't quite work the same way. Now, he doesn't really, go on to explain this part, but what he's pretty much referring to, or at least to make a longer story short, building the foundation of a business involves much more than just tracking revenue. When I explain this, I always relate it to, construction, building a house. If you have a poor foundation for a home, when you go to build that home, it's just going to fall over. So VeVe can have millions of dollars. VeVe can have billions of dollars. If they don't have the right systems and foundation in place, none of that matters. I also like using the example of building a business is like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. It is and it isn't. The main difference is that, when you got that jigsaw puzzle, you open up the packaging, you dump out all the pieces, you have everything that you need, right? When you build a business, the pieces that you start off with, you're missing pieces. You may have pieces you don't need. So there's steps involved with figuring out, okay, what pieces do I need? What pieces do I need to take away? And then how do I fit the pieces together? So those are two examples right there, but you need thick skin. And those are going to be words coming directly from David as well. So this one surprised me a little, not going to lie. So David says that up until this point, his biggest failure with VeVe has been his ability to raise the amount of money that some of VeVe's competitors have raised. And this caught me off guard because, just taking into consideration individuals like Al Khan on the team, the experience that a man like that has, but also just the experience that David has, right? He's built multiple different businesses before, and I'm pretty sure he actually still runs one that specializes in bringing brands over into the East. When he said that they could have done this a lot better, I was quite surprised because this would have definitely been something that I would have expected him to have a lot of experience with. Not to mention, he has like a 25-year relationship with Al Khan, and that's an individual who definitely has experience with this. Now, with that being said, I don't really think that this is that big of an issue anymore or something to be concerned about, because this would have been a larger issue back in like the really, really early days now the business obviously has cash flow. And actually, speaking of that, David does say that the team is quite frugal. So he says that he takes a small salary compared to what he could be taking based on VeVe's cash flow. Now, in terms of the logos that have dropped on the platform, David does confirm that there's one more logo drop coming. This last logo is going to be another gold and silver one, but this time of the newer version. And you're going to have to be present at Comic-Con to get it. So I believe in a similar way to them handing out the cards for the old one, they're going to be handing out the cards at this convention. And if you happen to get one, it is going to give you access to exclusive events at the convention. Now, I was a little confused at this part because they said that utility is still only going to be for the original gold and silver logo. Yet, if this new one gives you access to exclusive events, that's a form of utility. But I don't know if somebody wants to clarify this in the comments down below. I think, if I'm understanding this right, the utility that was discussed for the gold and silver logo up until this point is only going to pertain to the original one. And then there's going to be a form of separate utility for the newer one, if at all, past the exclusive events and stuff. So I believe I'm getting that right, but if not, please correct me down below. So they then discuss something we've brought up on the channel in the past before. They use the term ambassador, but I do not like that term. It just reminds me of pyramid schemes. But in this case, I'm referring to an affiliate program. So I find David's response here a little interesting. David says that they're restricted by licensors with how they run the program. Let's compare VeVe to Crypto Toys for a sec. That's a company that's been gaining a little bit of buzz in the community, but Crypto Toys just brought Disney onto the platform. They have Star Wars. They have big IP, right? They have an ambassador program, or an affiliate program, should I say. So I'm not saying that David's lying here. I do think that they are restricted by licensors, and keep in mind VeVe does have many more. But at the same time, I can't help but think from a marketing standpoint, this could also be a way for them to prevent onboarding while they fix some bugs. Because, and emphasis on the could, if they release an affiliate program, there's no doubt that we would see an onboarding of users. No doubt, right? Like, our community is so damn passionate, but also we've seen exchanges ask for, like, what token should we post, right? And then all of a sudden we just have our community flood the comment section of that post. If those same passionate community members had an incentive to onboard users, whether that's MCP points, whether that's collectibles, whether that's money, there would absolutely be an influx of users. And this brings me back to my point about how, you know, I personally think we should have the VeVeverse rolled out before mass marketing. It's kind of the same thing here, where if you have a large influx of users and you're still trying to fix a bunch of bugs, it's like, okay, how long are they willing to stay while everything's getting fixed? Kind of like what we've already experienced during the bear market, right? I could definitely be overthinking this, but I do think that this could potentially be a way to control the amount of users coming into the platform right now as well. David says that they don't have the resources right now to get into that. And again, it's my same feeling and thought with the first point there. I don't know how much I believe that. I know they have a ton of teams working on a ton of different things, but at the exact same time, they're also hiring up to that 300 team size. So it is going to be something on their list, but it's nothing that we can expect in the near future. And just some additional points to round the video off. They did very briefly talk about KYB, or Know Your Business. David says that VeVe is going to begin on a case-by-case basis to gauge the interest level. And then they also talked about things like the Hulk and Lion King and how those drops actually exceeded the team's expectations. David mentioned that the team hasn't seen that level of energy or hype on the app in a while. And I think it's fair to say that the last time we saw that was probably Lambo, which was towards the beginning of the year, I believe. Ladies and gents, that's going to conclude today's episode. Those are going to be 12 points I took away from the podcast. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoy the content, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. Comment down below what you want to see in a future episode. And as for next, I'll catch you then.